over a decade of a nearly consistent streak of bad Sonic games, the community was blessed with Sonic Frontiers, an open-world game with a speedster as the main character. Being able to run around in this open-world environment at supersonic speeds is just as fun as it sounds. From that alone, it's no wonder that Frontiers got such high praise from the Sonic community, as well as the gaming community as a whole. It even almost won Player's Choice at the Game Awards, losing out last minute to Genshin Impact. We won't talk about the controversy that caused. So anyways, Frontiers as a game is really good. My personal review for it is a solid 9 out of 10. I docked a point because there are still a few areas with either less polish than I'd hoped, or just a letdown in general. I swear the end could have been so much more fun. But beyond that, it's clear that the game still has its issues. Many players have already voiced their disliking of things like getting stuck in 2D sections on Chaos Island, the wasted potential of Rhea Island, or the way Ian Flynn wrote the story with plenty of callbacks to previous games. Maybe that last one is a bit of a joke, but the rest of these I totally understand and agree with. So let me add another problem to the mix: glitches. The game operates pretty well and is fairly well polished, but there are still a few glitches that manage to slip through the cracks. However, I don't see this as a bad thing. As a matter of fact, some of these glitches are the reason why I'm not kidding when I say that this is probably the most fun I've ever had with a modern Sonic game. In my opinion, some of these glitches even make up for the lack of momentum physics. There's a massive amount of potential with these glitches that makes the open world aspect of the game feel even more freeing than ever. Allow me to explain how. There are 5 main boss battles in the game: Giganto, Wyvern, Knight, Supreme, and the End. There's not a lot I can say about the last 3, but the first 2 have methods where you can battle them before collecting all the Chaos Emeralds, essentially sequence breaking the game. We'll talk about Giganto later, as that requires a trick that I want to talk about in more detail, but Wyvern is fair game for a quick explanation right now. To battle Wyvern normally, you need to collect 7 Chaos Emeralds, far too many memory tokens, and watch a ton of cutscenes. In normal gameplay, this is just fine. I enjoyed this island quite a bit on my first playthrough. But speedrunners, understandably, hate this. To beat the game as fast as possible, they want to skip as much of the story as they can. And oh boy did they find a way. By collecting just enough memory tokens to free Knuckles, then collecting 1 Chaos Emerald, Wyvern appears in a scripted chase sequence. Complete the chase sequence, then use any path or method you desire to make it to this door. This door leads to the trigger to start the Wyvern boss fight and end the island, but it's shut at the moment. To open it, you need to meet the boss fight's prerequisites that I stated earlier, and get a trigger to appear here to allow you to complete a puzzle, which then opens the door and lets you in. Or alternatively, just jump over the door. No, really, that's all there is to it. The door is made in such a way that you can just jump over it and head directly to the trigger that spawns in Wyvern, letting you collect a 7th emerald regardless of how many emeralds you have at this point, and just begins the battle. With this, you essentially have skipped almost all of the game's second major island. Knight doesn't have any cool tricks like this, but there are ways to get to his battle faster by skipping the chase sequence where you escape a shield and messing around a bit to skip that infamous pinball section. But this isn't on the same level as a massive island skip, so that's about all I had to say about it. Supreme has no such tricks that I am currently aware of, though I may almost certainly be wrong about that. The End is skippable entirely by just playing on any difficulty except for hard mode. A bit of a letdown, but hey, free time save. Magnet Dash, known literally as a homing attack cancelled boost, is a quick and fairly easy way to gain an immediate boost of an extreme amount of speed in midair, which you can preserve for way longer than just a single second you usually get by air boosting normally. Performing the trick is simple. Step 1, homing attack. Step 2, boost before you hit the target. If done correctly, which may take a bit of practice due to the short time window, you'll go flying. Learning about this trick was the first time I seriously thought that these glitches were the most fun I've had in a modern Sonic game, as being able to get this much speed in a relatively simple way makes the entire open world feel so much more fun to fly around. But beyond that, there is also speedrun potential with this trick. The infamous 1-2 has a few places where you can use this trick, but it's still difficult to pull it off and still manage to get the S rank. The time limit is just too tight, I guess. Magnet Dash can also break 4-4 in a few places, such as here, but that's not as useful. You can also use it in 4-6 to get stuck in this wall. neat. The two levels that are broken the most easily by Magnet Dash are 3-6 and 1-7. Trying to get a good speedrun time in 3-6 is what convinced me that Magnet Dash is a good contender for one of the most fun, unofficial tricks in a Sonic game. You can just break so much of the stage with Magnet Dash, and when incorporating a version of it where you start the homing attack from underneath, you can absolutely shatter it, like in this speedrun I found online. I don't think I'll ever be on quite the same level of gameplay as this guy is. But 1-7 is broken the hardest by Magnet Dash. Practically the entire level can be skipped by doing it just once. The S-Rank requires a time of 1 minute and 25 seconds. With Magnet Dash, you can do it in around 30 seconds, saving around a full minute. This is my best time I've gotten with this trick, and I hope it further proves my point of just how much fun it is. Alright, let's explain what happened with the video clip in the intro of this video. You know, the one with the DuckTales moon theme? Yeah, let's talk about that. To pull off this trick, you need to unlock the Stomp attack from the skill tree. The Stomp attack is only usable while in a combo, meaning you can't just walk up to an enemy and press A, hoping it'll work. There are a number of ways you can allow the Stomp attack to work, but my favorite has to be turning the camera away, punching the air, then turning the camera back around. For whatever reason, punching the air counts as starting a combo. That's actually super useful if your stats are as high as mine, and punching an enemy would just result in destroying them in one hit. Anyways, the process is as follows. Step 1, activate the Stomp attack. Step 2, just frames after you start the Stomp attack, press and immediately release the boost button. If you do it just right, and you have the right timing, this will happen. This trick goes by a few names. Its literal name is Stomp Attack Cancelled Boost Cancelled Release, but I suppose that doesn't roll off the tongue too easily. So the guy who discovered it named the trick after himself. This trick is called the DSS Shuffle, or the Darkspine Sonic Shuffle. But instead of going through the confusion of wondering if the shuffle part is supposed to be one of the two S's in the name, and wondering if the trick is just called DSS, there is another name that this trick goes by that I'll be using from now on. This trick is called the HSP, or the Hedgehog Space Program, and all you need to do to enlist in this program is just stomp and boost. The timing of this trick is a bit hard to master at first, and it'll take some practice, but once you figure it out, you can jump pretty much anywhere you want and admire the view, such as this random mountain I found on Ares Island. You can also use it to discover the true form of the smoke from the volcano on Chaos Island. You can also use it for practical purposes, such as skipping difficult platforming sections and landing directly in front of the Chaos Emerald vaults, or memory tokens scattered throughout the map. However, a much more well-known use of this trick is going to the Giganto boss arena before you collect the 7 Chaos Emeralds, essentially skipping all of Kronos Island after the tutorial. Usually, a ginormous invisible wall blocks your path, but thanks to these flying enemies right next to it, you can jump over the entire thing. Alternatively, you can use the trick near the beginning of Kronos Island. There's an invisible ceiling over most of the beginning segment, which usually prevents the Hedgehog Space Program from working, but there are a few areas where you can slip by. Doing this reveals something interesting. There's an otherwise unreachable cliff with 5 cocoa waiting to be collected. Usually the invisible ceiling prevents you from climbing the wall to reach them, but with the Hedgehog Space Program you can reach them and collect them just fine. Unfortunately, you can't use the Hedgehog Space Program in cyberspace levels as Sonic's skill tree is disabled in them, but that's not too much of an issue. Having the trick in the first place is more than enough for some real fun. The geometry of some walls in the game is steep enough that Sonic simply slides down them, but the Dropdash seems to overcome many of these slopes so long as you hit them at the right angle, which can be difficult and inconsistent but still lets you do things such as reach the top of Chaos Island's Ice Mountain without having to go around, or reaching the invisible wall on Kronos Island. There's not much else to this trick, I just thought it was neat. Here are a few examples of it in use. It's time to put all these tricks to use. A fairly well-known fact about this game is that originally, Kronos, Rhea, and Oranos Island were all supposed to be part of one huge island, but were separated into 3 at some point during development. What is only slightly less well known is that technically Kronos and Rhea are still part of one island. They're 2 halves of the same map, just duplicated twice. Allow me to prove it. Go to the same flying enemies in Kronos Island that lets you use the Hedgehog space program to skip to the Giganto boss battle early. But instead of landing in the boss arena, go to any other part of the island past the invisible wall. This part of the map is a direct copy of Rhea Island, but without the towers. Actually, it's without any sort of other object whatsoever. You'll only be able to interact with invisible walls here. Everything else is empty. But is that a bad thing? It means you get to explore the whole place without anything slowing you down. Doing this, I was able to take screenshots of various places within Forbidden Rhea, as I like to call it, including a few screenshots of Sonic just casually swimming through solid rock. Fun! There's also this part of the invisible wall surrounding the Giganto boss arena that makes the boost button freak out for some reason. Finally, there's this tower. I want to scale it. Run up the side of the wall like normal until you reach this point. Climb up the slightly confusing geometry of this weird circular part of the tower and reach the top of it. From here, jump to reach the next climbable part of the wall and go up to the next level. There's another circular thing here which is easier to climb, but jumping to the final wall run is a bit tricky. But if you do it all right, all you'll have to do now is just scale the taller of the 2 pillars on top and you'll be greeted with this view. This serves absolutely no purpose whatsoever other than being cool, and well, that's part of the fun of it. This final showcase is the result of hours of me exploring and glitch hunting, and is the sole reason why I wanted to make this video in the first place. Let's get into it. So, you may remember me saying that Kronos and Rhea are 2 parts of the same map, just duplicated twice. You can get to Forbidden Rhea pretty easily, but what about Forbidden Kronos? You can see it very easily from pretty much anywhere in Rhea, but a giant invisible wall prevents you from going there. And unlike in Kronos, there aren't any enemies right next to the wall that you can use the Hedgehog space program on. So how are we going to get up there? It's possible, but it's not obvious how. As you may have guessed, scaling these gigantic towers will help. We need their height. Specifically, this one right here, in the same area where the Giganto boss battle will take place. This tower challenges you to defeat numerous enemies on the way up, and has a single flying enemy at its peak. I bet you can guess the next step. Find a place to save and reload if you have to. Failing this trick is frustrating, but yes, we're going to use the Hedgehog space program here. Facing the invisible wall blocking off access to Forbidden Kronos, use the flying enemy to activate the Hedgehog space program. Move towards the invisible wall and just keep going forward. Once you reach the peak of your height, double jump, turn the camera to the side, then air dodge 5 times towards the wall. Do it right and you'll just barely scrape past it. At last, you're free to explore Forbidden Kronos to your heart's content. The open world just became a limitless world. Just like in Forbidden Rhea, some of the screenshots you can take here are fascinating. The lack of objects makes the whole thing feel both eerie and beautiful at the same time, especially when you can see the Rhea towers from almost any point on the map. Oh yeah, I also found that this area is basically a soft block. There's no way to get back up from here, and falling into water just respawns you right back to it. Time to reload the save file. My first instinct upon reaching Forbidden Kronos for the first time was to climb this tower. It's easy. There's a ramp that reaches the top. Even without the rails, the dash pads, or the springs, this is trivial. Then I went towards the tutorial area. The bridge there is gone and it's a bit too wide of a jump to get there normally, so I instead did a boost off of this weird level geometry to launch myself there. From there, I discovered something interesting. The invisible ceiling here seems to be gone. You can reach the top of the cliff pretty easily. That climbable wall at the beginning works too. There's no Coco on the ledge though. While here, you can open up the map. On both Forbidden Rhea and Forbidden Kronos, you can get screenshots like this, where you're hilariously far out of the bounds of the map. I thought that was interesting. Getting back to the mainland was also tricky, but I found this part of level geometry worked perfectly for boosting. Finally, I tried to scale some walls without the help of any of the objects that usually make it possible. This is where I did the majority of Dropdash techniques, attempting to climb up the wall behind a waterfall. I couldn't make it to the top platform, but hey, this is still pretty cool. I also noticed that the rock that usually covers the first spring after defeating Giganto is missing, so that was one fewer tool I had at my disposal, but I still managed to reach this platform, so I'm pretty satisfied. There was but one more thing I wanted to scale, and it's the big and obvious floating tower. No springs, no rails, no dash panels, no nothing. There's not even an enemy that'll allow us to do the Hedgehog space program to get there. It seems impossible to reach it. I thought so too at first. Then I started actually trying to get there anyways. My first idea was to use the cliff just past the invisible wall. Using the Dropdash to reach the cliff, I tried making my way around until I could get a good view of the distance I needed to cover from this height. It's too far. No way this was going to help. And then I discovered this. There's a set of ruins off to the side here, and the walls have some suspicious looking level geometry. I found that this part of the left wall and this part of the right wall both allow you to boost off of them to launch yourself at high speeds and, crucially, high altitudes. The one on the left is more consistent at getting launches, but the one on the right is the one that I eventually was able to make work. It took at least an hour of attempts and plenty of close calls, but I eventually confirmed that it is indeed possible to reach this platform just underneath the tower. We're off to a promising start. This platform has a climbable wall. Climbing it, then doing some careful platforming, will eventually lead you all the way around the tower and to this ramp. Boosting off of it launches you upwards, where you can now reach this other platform above you. We're almost there, I just want to make a few stops before we reach the top. The tower has a massive cut in the center, and you can go into there from here and just admire it. Oh look, it's that one weird symbol that we still don't know the meaning of. From here, I discovered that the loop over here has some weird physics. Suddenly I'm getting flashbacks to Sonic 06. Back to where we were, do some more platforming forwards. There's another ramp in the distance. Boost off of that one, and we're here! The summit of the floating tower of Forbidden Kronos, made reachable thanks to the combination of multiple glitches and hours of exploring and glitch hunting. There are two interesting things at the top of the tower here. The first is the lack of a Chaos Emerald vault. On actual Kronos, there's a vault here that usually holds one of the emeralds, but here, it's gone. That tells us that the vault was an object, not part of the level geometry. The inverse is true with these random boxes and containers that serve no purpose whatsoever. These are level geometry, but the vault is not. Weird. One more thing to do up here. I took a screenshot at the peak here and watched a few redditors lose their minds. Something about having the Rhea towers in the background while also being on top of a near impossible to reach tower just felt oh so satisfying to capture. The process of getting to this tower in particular prompted this whole video to be made, and oh my goodness, it was so much fun. Without glitches, Sonic Frontiers is incredibly fun. I had an absolute blast going through the game, witnessing the spectacle of the Titan boss fights, enjoying the callbacks in the story, witnessing the sudden canonization of the IDW comics.
I bet Tangle would love climbing around these ruins.
Yeah, Tangle is canon now. So is Whisper, probably. Heck yeah. But even though the game is really good by itself, breaking it apart was equally as fun. These glitches do not take away from the experience of the game, they add to it. The Hedgehog Space program in particular added an entire new way to explore these massive islands and admire the view. If anyone at Sega or Sonic Team is watching this, I beg of you, please do not patch these. If these experiences become inaccessible in later versions of the game, it will be a tragedy. It'll probably be worth it though, considering we're getting new playable characters soon, but I'd still like to preserve some of this artificial fun as well. This experience was unlike anything I've ever done in a Sonic game before, and as someone who has been a Sonic fan for literally as long as I can remember, I hope me saying that can contribute to this overall message. To the players, have fun, explore. The boundaries of this game were already far and few in between, but now, even those are starting to fall apart, making the world feel more open than ever. Thanks for watching.
What?